and welcome to today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm your host, as always, Michelle Graves, affectionately known throughout the United States as the Money Lady. And as always, my show is committed to bringing you information and people that you cannot access, get to, talk to, hear from in any other venues. So as always, I'm delighted to be a part of your world, and thank you for coming into my world today. We've got an exceptional show today, so sit down, get comfortable. I have as my guest today an amazing woman who will be talking about the subject of child welfare and about the state of our children in America. This is near and dear to me because I love children. I think they're God's gift to earth. And so many things are happening to our children today. You're not oblivious to it. It's on television, radio, newsprint. But I'm going to talk to a woman who has been knee deep and on the ground floor in this very, very critical time affecting our children. My guest today for the next hour is Helen E. Jones Kelly. She is an attorney at law, and she is the executive director of ADAMHS Board in Dayton, Ohio. And we're going to be talking about what her background is, her agency mission is, and just this issue of our children and what we're going to do. So without further ado, I'm going to go on and introduce you to her, and let's get started with the show. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for
I'm
letting
so,
me join you.
oh please, I'm so honored that you were able to free up your very busy schedule to talk about this subject. You know, you triggered in me when we had lunch, some time ago with two of our friends, and we got into the subject of children. And the things that you said were profound and made me go like, because in my side of the world, it's strictly business and money and investments. You raise your children, you do what is right and honorable before God. But all of this going on and these going-ons and your experience just set me on a path. And I have begun to research, read, study. And while I never can claim to be an expert like you are, a professional, my awareness is heightened. I look at children very differently now. What would you like to say to our viewers
that's
today?
wonderful to know. You're looking at them differently.
Yes.
That's what I would want to say to anybody. Look at children differently. They're not little adults. They have a world of their own. They have a lot going on in their own heads. And so often we forget that they're real people with real feelings, and they're soaking up a lot of what's going on around them. And how do we, as adults, protect them?
How do you protect them?
We have to be aware of them. We have to be aware. You know, so often people think, well, they're not paying attention, but they are. They're absorbing anything that's going on in our lives. Those of us who are caretakers for young people need to be aware of that and need to process with them when crises occur, because they've absorbed the crisis as well. So often they can pick up on our own emotions before we even say anything about it.
That's so amazing. That is so amazing. So when you talk about children being able to pick up on our emotions, what do you see as probably the biggest challenge we're facing today with regard to the children?
Well, you know, we actually see it with the adults. It's the childhood experience that begins to manifest itself as adults. We see trauma in adults. We see people acting out in ways that we just don't understand.
Right.
But in all likelihood, something occurred to them at a very young age that left an imprint, a footprint, if you will, in their heads that never was dealt with. So now they're acting out on experiences, that trauma, and it creates for us now this whole new world of focused trauma and trying to understand stressors and the things that occur in early childhood.
So a lot of the behavioral dysfunctionalities, as I say, among adults traces right back to the childhood experience.
It could have been one incident.
One incident
that didn't get processed.
To send them on a spin.
Right.
Wow, that's amazing. So what happens? They have children, and then they transfer their trauma into the child or their children. Is that what happens?
That's very possible. That's very possible. Or they simply manifest it at some point. Something triggers for them. Let's say something happened when they were 6. at age 36, something triggers that for them, and they go off on a rampage, or they act out in a way that doesn't seem to fit the personality that we associate with them.
Wow. So that is major.
It is major.
That is major. So essentially, what we're saying is when we look at children, that because they are little sponges, that if an adult presents them with a way that is not socially correct, they will process it as normal behavior. Is that what you're
That's very, very
suggesting?
often the case. Children normalize. You know, we work with a lot of young people who have been physically or sexually abused. We know that that is not normal, but they normalize it because of their relationship with that adult. And then they go on into their adulthood with that behavior, acting out with that behavior, something that occurred with them at a very early age.
So essentially, a child that is sexually abused will replicate that behavior in their adult life. Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility if there is no intervention
Okay.
with that child. Certainly, if there's the appropriate intervention, that child can go on with their life without ever having to have that experience again or acting out against someone else. But there need to be interventions along the way that help the child get over that trauma. Otherwise, it becomes a normal part of life. And that happens with so many, we see so many of our young girls who are on the street now.
Yes.
Sex slave trade.
Yeah, right.
Because they've normalized that behavior. It seems appalling to those of us who are not part of that world, but for them it's a normal lifestyle. And they, over time, come to accept it as just a way of being. So without the appropriate interventions in a child's life after a trauma, and we don't always know when the trauma occurs, which is the unfortunate piece, because sometimes abuse will occur while a child is still an infant.
My God.
And it creates an imprint.
Right.
So we have to be really cognizant of what's going on with our young people when we have responsibility for them.
Tell me a little bit about ADAMHS, that you are the leader, visionary, and head of this organization. What an accomplishment.
I am simply a member of the team.
Okay,
I am,
you're so modest.
It's the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services Board for Montgomery County. So that's such a mouthful that we've shortened it.
I like that.
We provide all of the planning and funding for public mental health and addiction services in Montgomery County.
My goodness.
We
now,
work
how
in
many
conjunction
agencies is that?
Well, there are about 40 agencies with whom we contract. We don't provide the services, but we provide the funding and the oversight for those services. So there are about 40 agencies in Montgomery County with whom we contract for the provision of those services. Some of them are well known in that they are very large mental health agencies, behavioral health agencies, I should say. Dayton West, South Community, SBHI, and Eastway are the 4 large behavioral health services. Then there are a variety of smaller, more specialized agencies that provide a level of services within the gaps that are left.
My goodness, that's a lot.
It's
you
a
say
lot.
40? That's a
That's
lot.
right.
Are you responsible for fundraising since you are the oversight agency for these smaller nonprofits?
Well, we talk about power of money.
Oh, yeah.
And within Montgomery County, power of money has taken on a real context in the public sector, in that about 30 years ago, the community developed what is called a human services levy process.
Okay.
We actually collaborate on how we fund social services within this community. It's a public-private partnership which is led by citizens. So we don't have to fundraise per se, but we do. We are a part of the Human Services Levy campaign. About every 4 years, we go out for dollars for the levy process.
And the community votes on that.
The community votes on it, and it's always been supported because within this community, there's an understanding that all of these services work well when they're working together.
Absolutely.
And there's a need that has to be addressed. So the Human Services Levy addresses that need in the public venue, along with some of the private agencies that exist within the community.
So there are private nonprofits that are tied into this system as well.
Yes.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Very innovative.
I think that's I'm not aware that that's happening in Cincinnati at all.
It's the only other community in Ohio where it happens is in Cuyahoga.
Okay,
County.
up in Cleveland.
And they have a specialized human services levy. Ours is more broad, serving all of the social services
And
agencies.
your funding is pretty well at the point it's passed by the taxpayers. You don't have the
Yes.
challenges. Now that's a nice place to be today in terms of that.
It is. It is a very nice place to be. There are challenges periodically in that new needs emerge, always, with the demographics changing and with the economy going in the direction it's going. But the community understands that we take care of our own. And that's really what the process is about.
So wonderful.
It really is.
You sit in an awesome place, Helen.
It's a great community.
I'm so serious. I will tell you, being that I do reside in Cincinnati and I commute up here to do this show, and I tell people, Dayton is an amazing community.
It really is.
And I have had a chance to interview some incredible people that are here, and what I find consistently, and not to make my viewers in Cincinnati irritated, but the truth of the matter is I do find a very tight web of interrelationships here that I find to be absolutely innovative, creative, and frankly inspiring.
It is inspiring. It's that, I guess, the old way of looking at how we take care of each other.
Yes.
And we've now taken it into the community, really a more broad-based level of how we support one another with this web of caring and relationships. And that's an important way to be able to get through economic downturns.
Well, in fact, I talked about this on one of my YouTubes and on one of the telecasts, which is that we're coming back to the days where you're going to have to take care of one another.
Right.
And it's not about the classism where because you make more money, you are automatically better than me.
Right.
Or because a person is poor, that they are automatically less than me. And there used to not be that going on. I know when we grew up, and viewers just be aware that me and Helen went to high school and junior high school together. That's a long time. I feel that back then we were much more community oriented and worked closer together, and everybody kind of knew everybody, and you knew the people that were having troubles and you tried to circle around them and help them.
Well, absolutely. And you know, back then we had front porches too.
Oh, we did have front porches.
And you know, when we talk about children,
yes,
everyone was looking out for the babies.
Yes.
We had front porches, we had backyards where people played. We didn't have computers, so everybody was outside.
And everybody was outside. I think about that a punishment was not being able to go outside. Can you imagine the loss of your freedom to run around on your bikes and play jacks and have fun? And being in the house was just like horrible.
Right.
And today the children are angry if you want them outside.
Right. They don't understand why I have to go outside.
Why do I have to go outside?
I want to stay inside and watch TV or play on my computer.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of the way that we should be raising our kids.
That's amazing. So tell me a little bit about yourself. This agency sounds like it's a great agency. Give me a little bit of background about you and what makes you tick.
Well, you know, I tick because of the work I get to do with kids and families.
Oh, that's amazing.
Even in this world, I've been in the ADAMHS system now for about a year.
Okay.
I came from jobs and family services. My background is that myriad of activity around social services, human services, with some splashes of the private sector in between. So I see the business of human services possibly in a very different way as from some of my colleagues, because it really is a business of serving people.
It is a business.
And we have to be very smart with our dollars.
Yes, we do.
There will never be enough dollars to fund all of the needs in the community. So the only way that you can get the greatest impact is to be able to work with other providers and to find new ways of doing some of the old business and addressing the new needs as they're coming along. You know, sometimes it's really hard to say, I can't fund this anymore because there's a greater need over here that I have to pay attention to. So you hope that you're able to inspire people, if they need to keep that other program going, that it is such a part of the culture that it keeps going because people have made that commitment. But you find other ways in which to bring dollars and fresh ideas into serving people, because you're in the business of serving people and lifting them up. That's really what this business is about. And in this case, it's all about how we serve people's mental health needs.
Do you see that on the rise?
Well, oh my gosh, yes.
I was telling this to an associate of mine, and I said, there's no way we can accurately and empirically document the number of people that are spinning out of control because of the economic stress of not having a job,
Right.
not having money, and it wears on you, wouldn't you say?
It definitely wears on you. People are having to deal with issues they've never had to deal with before. You know, you've got folks who are losing their employment when they're close to the point of retirement.
Right.
And they don't necessarily have that nest egg built
Right.
up to
Right.
sustain them
Right.
through the next 20 years of the
Right.
typical retirement period. You have people who aren't able to get a higher education opportunity because they can't pay for it. You have people who are having health issues
Yes.
related to their mental health issues.
Yes.
You know, so we're just now beginning to understand that there are probably 1 in 3 citizens throughout the community dealing with some level of a behavioral health or addiction issue. Most often caused by what they're not used to.
You're right.
Yeah.
Because I see it. In fact, I was sharing with an individual. I said, I have found myself backing away from confrontational situations. Even if I'm right, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter because you do not know what a person is going through.
Right.
And they may decide to postal on you.
Well, you know, people are dealing with so much stress, and we
Yes.
tell people you don't let it show, you know, because that's a sign of weakness. And unfortunately, it's a sign of strength just to get up every day.
It is.
And put on the face and deal with things that folks are having to manage on a daily basis. Can you imagine households where people have lost their jobs after years of service with no notice whatsoever, and suddenly you've got a mortgage,
Right.
you've got children, you've got all of these expenses of life,
Right.
and you've never had to rely upon social services before, so you don't even know where to turn to get assistance.
And I do see this more and more, which is why I say that I've backed away from a lot of harshness, which is quite private sector, as you know. Keep it real, cut it to the chase, blah, blah. And because we're now dealing with humans who are suffering and hurting, and their children. And this is why I say on this show it's about you and your families, because now we're seeing the children. And how are the children being affected? Do you have any kind of observations that you've seen from these changing times?
What we see is where families have those family council meetings, if you will, where they bring the children into the reality of their situation, they're much more successful in getting over the challenges. It's where we try to keep it away from them. You know, if we have hardship around money management, we need to let the kids know, no, there really isn't any. Here's our budget for this week, and here's what we need to do to stay within our budget, and then perhaps as we save a little bit here and there, we can get to do some of those extra special things. But when we don't explain it to our children, don't keep them in the loop, and help them understand budgeting, because they need to
need to know, Helen, that there's not a rainbow.
There's not a money tree in the backyard.
There's not a money tree in the backyard and a rainbow in the sky.
Right.
You know, that there are reality issues that children have to become aware of and accustomed to. If a family is not accustomed to these council meetings, because so many families are headed by single mothers now.
Right.
And so you don't have a present father in the home. And she is going through many times multiple jobs. These women are carrying 2 and sometimes 3 jobs. During the week, 2 jobs, and then the weekend, trying to keep their families intact. So the financial side there, you got to know, working 3 jobs, you're not here anyway.
Right.
You can't be.
It's hard. It's hard. Been there, done that.
I mean,
Been there, done that.
Me too. And you're just not here. So what happens to the children in these environments? What can you recommend to our viewers?
You know, that's even more important for mom to find time. Mom, and in many cases we have dads who are that single parent too, to find the time, to make the time, at least that 30 minutes of time to sit down and have that one-on-one with the child. So many parents, because they're going from job to job to job, maybe they're still in school, maybe the child's in bed by the time they finally do get home, They have to make the time. That has to be a very conscious effort on their part to spend one-on-one time. We know from the research that the average child spends 20 minutes a week in conversation with parent. And that's even in the best households.
20 minutes a week
compared to the hours they're spending in front of the television or the computer screen. Parents have to counteract
20 minutes?
20 minutes.
Helen.
And it's going down. And so we have to be very conscious about making time for our children, even with our busy lives, even if we're working several jobs. Figure out where we can carve out that time. Maybe it's over the meal that we do in the morning. You know, just spend a few minutes just chatting about their day and about, you know, what we are going to be doing, giving them some idea of what the routine is going to be, and having a routine, because that's another important part. Kids need a routine. They need a routine.
Which is a time to eat, a time to do homework, a time to go to bed.
That's right. They need schedule, and they crave schedules. You know, you can tell when they're acting out sometimes. They're off schedule. They're craving the adult to put them on a routine so that they understand what's going on. There's some consistency within their life.
Well, do you find though, and I've had this conversation because my children said they were raised in a military environment. And Mom had lists and schedules and tasks and check off and rewards but I feel strongly, because I've heard this so much, where mothers want to be friends with their children, and well, we're buds, and I'm like, I'm not your bud. No, I'm your mother.
And there is a difference.
And there is a difference.
Yes.
Okay. So do you find that a lot in terms of counseling and working with families where the parents have crossed the line of boundaries and authority? And how do you find that affects children?
And what you just said was so important. Boundaries and authority, appropriate boundaries within the household. We are not here to be our children's friends. They should have age-appropriate friends.
Yes.
We are here to rear them and to give them the basic kinds of boundaries and guidelines that they need, and set a set of expectations for moving into adulthood. We can be their friends when they're adults. Yeah. But even then, you know, there's still that parental boundary that we have to honor. But as they are growing up, we need to be the parent or the caretaker, whatever that relationship may be, because a number of children are in surrogate households. That adult needs to be the provider, the caregiver, and the appropriate parental type for them, setting rules, giving them espousing guidelines, helping them understand what it is that they want to do as they move towards adulthood. And you can't do that when you're trying to be their friend. No. Because you've got to say no sometimes, and you've got to set the appropriate corral around behavior so that they know what to expect.
Well, I was thinking about this. My youngest child was at Cincinnati Country Day, and she wanted to go to our alma mater, Walnut Hills, because her peers were there, which was her choice. She could have gone there at any time, take the exam and go. And she carried on, and so she took the exam, and of course, she in her sophomore year at Country Day, and she was accepted. And then she said, well, I don't think I want to do that now. And I was like, it's really okay, because that's $18,000 I can keep.
Right.
But she chose not to. And then later when she brought it up, I said, oh, wait a minute. I responded to your desire and did the appropriate, took the appropriate steps. And now you decide, I don't want to, I want to do that again. No, we're staying on path.
You've made a choice, and there are consequences.
Now there are consequences, and she talked about that as an adult, how she said, I was just a kid and you were giving me choices, and I said, exactly. And you have to learn early that there are consequences for your choices. Right. Because if you go into adulthood thinking that you can go hither and there, and that everybody's just going to be, oh, that's you're good. That's what the kids say. You're good. I'm like, oh no, you're not good. Right. You're not. I find that also the case today, where parents are having a tough time giving children choices and letting them do their own thing, including their peer relationships?
A lot of parents, and they talk about helicopter moms. You know, you've heard that term.
What
a
is
lot
a
of
helicopter
parents,
mom?
you know, that's that one that hovers over
and
is always making these decisions for the child. That's not a great place to be either. I really admire parents who are providing a lot of supervision and counseling, but we also have to have our children learn how to make choices, decisions in life, and then understand that there are consequences related to each of those choices. One of the things that has always bothered me is parents who drink with their children because they say, I'd rather have them here drinking where they're safe at home. Well, it doesn't matter that they're safe at home. It's illegal.
Well, it's the same thing with marijuana. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Right, same thing. It's
you
illegal.
Are doing what?
You know, and then what does that child learn in terms of consequences from that? So some parents go overboard trying to provide supervision and making all the choices and allowing their children to have these adult kinds of situations, certainly before their age, and certainly in cases that are truly illegal situations in which they're engaging with their children.
Well, is this a need to be approved and accepted by the child? What is this?
Yeah,
liked?
Parents want to be liked, and that's okay. But you know, there's a reality. We don't always like everybody. You need to love your children.
Yes,
you
you
need
do.
to guide your children.
Yes, you do.
But there are going to be some times when you don't like the behavior, and vice versa. And that's okay because you get past that moment. But you act in love and concern, and that's a very different kind of feeling and set of responsibilities towards our responsibilities for our young people.
Well, let me share something with you, because this is becoming a real peeve with me and other women I've talked to, older women. You go into stores and you hear mothers cursing out their children.
Ooh, yes.
And saying awful things to their children, little people. And one little boy, and they always put the candy at the checkout aisle. We know that.
We know.
Because the candy position has never changed. And don't act up at the checkout. And just don't, because it's just the end of you. And in more than one situation, I have seen things just erupt out of control. Namely, the child starts on a path and intervention takes place. The mother says no. And then it just spins off into something else, where she's now screaming and cursing the child, or if the child is in a store and the mother's trying to get their attention, and then they started calling the child names, and then profanities, and then and in one situation, I just stopped, and I just looked at her. I mean, as a woman to a woman, I just looked at her, Helen, because I was like, do you not know where this is headed? But what happens? What is that about? Is that a mental issue?
I don't think that's so much a mental issue as it is a parenting issue. You know, knowing how to parent. First of all, discipline starts before you ever get into the store. Okay, before you set foot in the store, before you get out of the car, we're going in here. We have a list of things we need to get. We're not buying candy today. So let's not even bother to ask about that, okay? But you can help mommy get the things that we need to get, and you can help push the cart, or you can ride in the cart, and when we get home, you get a piece of fruit, because I'm going to be so proud of how well you acted. Okay, so those are the kinds of things you say to young children. Affirming behaviors before you ever set foot in the store. So the child has a set of expectations. Now, using the store as an example, but in all cases, you should always give a child a set of your expectations before you go into a situation.
My goodness.
And that way you can reference that again. Remember when we talked in the car and I said we weren't going to get that today? You remember that? And then that's all you need to say. And if they start that whining, people know the kids have meltdowns.
We know that. We do.
So moms don't have to get into the meltdown with them. All mom has to do is say, you're getting ready to melt down, so let's go.
Yes.
And there have been times when I was raising toddlers that I had to leave the cart. We got in the car, and I had to go back later that evening after they were asleep, and there was another adult in the household to keep an eye on them. Because you just don't engage in the tantrum with them. You understand that they're going to have it, So you try to do whatever you can to offset it before it even gets started.
What about, and I have to speak to this because this is, in Cincinnati, there's a Dr. Victor Garcia who's with TED, and he's also a part of the Core Change movement, and he's a pediatric surgeon at Children's, and he had some statistics on children that was so traumatic, the number of children that are shot under 1 year old, shot, not one time, just shot, bang, 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 bang. And the number of children in Cincinnati that have been so abused physically, and very disturbing. I had him on my show when I was producing out of Cincinnati, and a profound man. But what makes a parent do this to a child?
Well, you know, that again, setting the expectation situation as calm as possible, because you should never discipline a child when you're mad. You know, when you're at that point, you know, I used to tease my kids and say, I have this nerve, this one last nerve back here, and you're working it, that very last one. You know, when you're feeling that way, when you're getting exercised yourself, that is not the time to try to discipline, and certainly not physically discipline a child, because you're going to inflict injuries. And discipline is not about inflicting injury. Discipline is about redirecting behavior.
Interesting.
And it should be done
Let
in
me
a
hear
calm
that again.
movement.
Discipline is about redirecting behavior.
Yes. It's the same thing with a child as it is in the workplace. If you're supervising an employee, you're trying to redirect behavior with a disciplinary process. It's not about punishment per se. And that's, you know, we don't even want people to associate that sense of punitive behavior with discipline, because you want it to be as positive as possible. You want to use coaching style as much as possible, even with a very young child. You know, I watch my youngest daughter is raising 3 little girls, and I just enjoy this so much. Yeah, I wonder where she got all of this, because I didn't have it when I was, you know, raising the kids at first.
But I know.
I watch her redirect their behavior in ways that just amaze me. And it's usually just a word, you know, and she doesn't have to use physical punishment. She's able to redirect them, and they move on. They keep going. And at that very young age, where usually kids really dig in, and when they dig in, she walks out of the room.
See,
as
that
opposed
was my
to that
thing.
parent that wants to snatch the arm. And
I'm
then,
leaving now. You're driving me into a place.
I'm going to go to my room now. I need a time out.
I need a time out. That was my thing. I need a time out from you. That is powerful. But for women, so do you, well, let me redirect that question. Do you feel that most young parents need parenting training?
You know, I think all parents need some level of parenting training.
Okay.
Most of us don't get that kind of training. I know in high schools, a lot of the high schools, they have the computer generated dolls, and they have some of those experiences. But a lot of the young people who are raising children right now were not necessarily raised themselves. You know, I've been in those situations where there's always the child who's dropped off at the football game, and then nobody comes back to get them. And I always have the rule, you don't get in a stranger's car, you know.
Right.
But then you can't find that parent to call them and say, I'm going to bring your child home, so then you're in that dilemma. Well, that's not an isolated situation anymore. We have a lot of children whose parents are busy. Sometimes it's not malicious. They're really busy. They're at work. They can't get away. They're working the kinds of jobs where they thought they'd be able to get there and pick the child up, or they can't contact the child by phone. So how do we as a community
that's what
parents?
Right.
And it's really through the training process, because people aren't trained on how to be a parent. And that's all about the communication. If we're learning how to parent, how to communicate with a spouse, with a sibling, it makes all of our relationships that much better. Yeah, it's not just about parental training, it's about communication and training around how we talk to other people and being age appropriate with that communication.
I think that's so amazing what you said about how we talk to other people, and the level of respect or disrespect that can be conveyed in a voice. or in an attitude or in a behavior.
Just a tone.
Just a tone. Just a tone. And I'm seeing, like I said, I believe what you said about that 1 in 3 people is dealing with mental issues, and may even be more as this thing progresses. And because of that, communication skills in many cases just kind of go by the wayside, Helen. It's like, I don't have time to talk to you. This is how I feel, and then here it goes.
And there it goes.
There it goes.
Escalates.
Yeah, it escalates, and it's something that's not so good. It is not so good.
And we do it with our children, and we see it in the public all the time. There used to be places I would go to get service. I'm going to date myself here. The old Clark gas stations.
Yes.
For that $1 that you'd spend to get $1 worth of gas, and the guy would come running out, he'd clean the windshield, wipe off the steering wheel. How else can I help you?
Yes.
You know, and I always resonate back to that, because that was back when we provided service to people. Now you often go into places and you have to wait for them to finish their personal conversation about what happened last night or where they're going tomorrow. And they kind of snap at you because you're bothering them, because you want to know which aisle the oranges are on.
Right.
You know, and it's just, there's just this behavior that we have towards one another that doesn't reflect customer service. And it's not just customer service when we're out to buy something, it's customer service for internal customers. Sometimes that customer may be a member of our family.
Right.
How do we talk to them? How do we make them feel valued? How do we keep from making them feel like they're interrupting us or interfering with our life in some way? You know, how do we serve each other?
That's powerful what you just said. It does start at home, Helen.
Does.
It does. In how you treat one another, and whether you're willing to listen to one, and particularly with little people. I shrink down to their level, and I listen to what they have to say.
And sometimes what they say is so inspirational.
Oh, isn't
so
it
powerful.
amazing? I mean, just like, where did they come from with this? It is so absolutely and completely, in so many cases, off the chart. You know, Art Linkletter used to have a show when we were growing up. Kids say the darndest things. And it's, they do, and even with the challenges today, I'm just persuaded that the community has to wrap itself around the children. Now, in times past, was the church very instrumental? Because mine were, it was an option. They had to do church, and they had to go to Sunday school, and they had to go to vacation Bible school, and they growled and all the, but it did not matter, because the car was running, and you were going to get in the car and go to Sunday school. But do you see that with the church disconnecting, or I shouldn't say the church, the people are disconnecting. They don't see the church as functioning in that way, so many of these situations. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, just because I've been in so many conversations, even with the faith community, as they grapple with their relationship with community. You know, what can the church do to make a difference? I was just in a meeting a few nights ago on that issue, as we talked about youth who are at risk. You know, what can the church do to support young people who are living on the streets or in their cars? And unfortunately,
is that predominant? Is that happening more and more?
Oh, it's happening more and more. We have this group, especially kids who are coming out of foster care.
Okay.
They're like 17, well, even as young as 14. And under all of the federal guidelines for housing and stability, if a young person has access to a bathroom and somebody's feeding them, let's say, for example, your daughters are still living at home and they have a friend who just seems to hang out all the time.
Yes,
always there.
Yes.
At some point,
you wonder, where's their mother?
Yeah, why are they always here?
Yeah, what is that?
You know, and you start thinking, well, you know, it's time for dinner. They should go home. Well, no, they're always going to be there for dinner. They may actually be living at your house without you knowing it, because they don't have a home, and excuse me for the preposition at the end of the sentence, to go to. A lot of young people are living either on the streets, in cars, or kind of on your front porch because they have no place to go.
Oh my God.
And under federal guidelines, they're not homeless as long as they have access to food and a bathroom.
So your house becomes the access center.
That's the access center. You know, we used to talk about the Kool-Aid house,
yes,
right?
Right.
Well, you know, now it's very real, because you've got a lot of young people between the ages of, say, 14 and about 24 living on the streets.
Jeez.
And where there used to be places for them to go, there aren't anymore. The churches used to have, they could sleep in the basement. They used to have programs. A lot of our churches don't have the ability to do that anymore. And as they struggle with their changing demographics, they're trying to figure out, well, how do we serve these young people? And then, of course, there's the fearfulness of serving them. There's the worries about liability. What if something happens? So you've got a disconnect
Is it
between
about
community.
liability?
Most often it's not.
Okay.
People go there first. Oh, what if something happens, then I'm going to get sued.
Okay.
But the reality is it's rare when something happens.
Yes.
It is very, very rare. That should not be our first thought. Our first thought should be, oh my gosh, here's a young person. How do I help them get safe? How do I help them get to the services that they need? How do I help them get connected? And that's the other piece for me. We do not refer people. We should connect people.
I like that term.
Don't send people somewhere. They don't get there.
Right.
Connect
I like that.
them
I like
with
that
what
term.
they need.
I like that.
And sometimes we have to put them in the car. That's a liability. Put them in the car, take them there so that they're able to get immediate access to what they need.
Is a child that is gone through that foster care system, I have seen and read and heard of so many sorrowful stories about the foster care system and what happens with children that get caught up in that system, and then they return back to their families because of the desire to keep the family intact. But some people are just dysfunctional parents.
Right. Some people are just they never learned how to parent.
They never learned.
But even though I was in charge of our public system for so many years, I firmly believe that children belong with families.
Okay.
There are a lot of wonderful, I'm a foster mom.
Oh my goodness.
There are a lot of, and I'm not saying I'm wonderful, but there are a lot of well-meaning foster parents out there. But the reality is children should be able to be with their own parents. And unless it's a very, very unsafe environment, we as a system need to make sure that we keep them connected with their families, because when they leave the foster care system, they're usually going back home in some way, some form. They're reconnecting with their family of origin. So what can we do to help strengthen that relationship until the child can be safe in that situation? Maybe the foster parent has an open access for the parents to visit with the child. So they're kind of a mediator for the behaviors of the parents, and they can role play and they can model what a parent does with a child. There are better ways of serving kids in the system than always removing them, placing them with strangers, and then much later reconnecting them with family. So we are firm believers that first you try to build the family up and help build those relationships up in ways that make sense for that unique child. But the reality is there are a lot of kids growing up in foster care who end up leaving foster care
and going back or living on the streets. They still connect often with the family of origin, but they still may be living on the streets or with other folks. They just kind of go from pillar to post because we haven't stabilized them in foster care, and we've often traumatized them that much more. Imagine what it would have been like for you to have been lifted out of your family situation, placed with strangers without understanding why. Well, does someone tell them why?
We don't do as good a job of that as we should. Back to, what do we tell children? How do we speak truth to them?
Without damaging them.
Without damaging them.
Yes.
But so often we err on the side of shielding them from the raw truth. But the truth is, kids know what's going on in the household. So you explain to them, this is not good behavior on the part of your parents. So we're going to let you go stay with another family for a while, and you'll be visiting with your parents, but you make sure that those visits occur, and you keep them connected, and you explain why the behavior of the parents made it necessary to remove the child, so that the child doesn't think that they did something wrong.
Because that's the typical response. A child thinks that they did it.
Right. And that's why they're not with mom. Not because mom was doing something that was totally inappropriate. So you explain why it was inappropriate so that the child feels at least, okay, I understand that, so I'm not going to do that. But I can still be okay loving my mom.
I think that's very, very powerful, because many times when I do have friends that were in foster care who were not really, they were severed from their families. And there is a disconnect. Their ability to embrace and to touch is absent. in so many cases. I mean, I'm
the most important relationship you have in your life is with your parent. And so when that gets severed without you understanding why it's being severed, that creates bonding issues for you later on. If we want people to be able to parent well, to be able to partner well, we have to help people sustain important relationships, or at least to understand important relationships. So the most difficult decision, I sat as a magistrate where you make these decisions about permanent custody and the rights of parents. How do you take a child away from a parent permanently without a lot of information and with a lot of effort to keep that bond intact if at all possible? So I would always try to find someone else within that extended family,
an aunt or
who
a
could
grandmother,
keep the connection strong. Because one day there are going to be questions. It's like children who get adopted, who then as adults go back looking for
their parents,
their biological parents, or for some answers about why the adoption had to occur. We have to give people information, even as children, and it's age-appropriate information. We don't have to give them the whole story, but we help them understand the circumstances so that they can then be part of their own healing process.
Well, I'm going to bring up an interesting stat, and that was the U.S. Census population has determined that the number of grandparents raising their grandchildren is growing quite rapidly. In fact, that's the fastest movement going on right now, and it's the number of grandparents who at 70 and sometimes older are assuming primary parenting responsibilities after they thought they were done with it.
Absolutely.
So, and how does that happen? I know that they said many of the reasons was drug related, or their son or daughter was incarcerated, or the child was abandoned. Do you have much insight into that?
We do, and the most significant numbers come out of households where the parent becomes drug involved.
Okay.
And grandparents step in to take the young children in to raise them. And depending upon the parent's recovery process, they may end up living with grandparents until they reach adulthood. Now we have a lot of grandparents who are stepping in because the parents are in the military. You may have both parents who are overseas fighting the war, and here are the children who have to be maintained. So grandparents are stepping in and raising more and more military children.
Now, is that a permanent basis? Because you're not in war forever. They just raise them until the
tour of duty is over, and you hope it ends successfully for that parent. But sometimes it doesn't, so then the grandparent does become the permanent caregiver for that child. Then you have a lot of grandparents who their child may not be drug involved, but because of job layoffs and they're trying to go off somewhere else and find employment, or they're going to school, grandparents are giving more and more care. We see a lot of that occurring as well, where it's really in that after-school care that morphs into, well, they'll stay here for the weekend, well, they're staying overnight, I'm taking them to school, and then pretty soon they're there. All but living with it.
They're there.
So there's more and more of that occurring as well, just because the parents don't have the resources. And in a lot of households, you've found now where we're getting back to extended family households.
That is absolutely, well, I'm okay with it because my grandparents were such a major part of my life. You know, but what I'm seeing today, though, and is the number of seniors who are widows, because truthfully, the men die early. And so you've got women now in their 70s, widows, who are trying to raise children. And the financial pressures, et cetera, because the law, and you're an attorney, the law is pretty crisp about who is the parent and who is not. And how are you finding that?
That's all over the place.
Yes.
There are a number of complications, and you mentioned one that's really significant, where you have a widow who is on a fixed income.
Yes, definitely.
And who may or may not have been in a job that allowed her to accumulate much of a nest egg. Now trying to bring children into the household. That eat a lot. That
clothing,
grow a lot, you know. So you have shoes and all the
and they're
the clothing.
rambunctious.
And they are. So
At
you've got
7, I mean,
maintenance
you know,
issues.
come on, trying to pick up a child
Right.
at my age is like, oh my gosh, I can't pick you up.
They're
But-
rambunctious, and their school expenses, because as schools look at their budgetary issues,
Right.
they're cutting expenses, and more of that is being now, I don't want to use the word foisted, but rather, for lack of a better term, parents and grandparents are having to pick up the expenses
Yes.
associated with textbooks, after-school activities, and those things that used to be part of the free public school
Right,
system.
right.
If you've got someone on a fixed income who's trying to address all those issues, and then not to
Wow.
mention the health issues, because if I'm on Medicare and I have a very fixed health plan, I can't bring these children
Right.
onto my health plan.
Right.
And unless we can demonstrate that they qualify for a federal program, then they don't have health benefits.
Wow.
And how do I take
but
them
you're
to
right.
the dentist?
Right.
What if they get sick and need a shot? Or
Right.
they need their
And
series
are
of shots
you, as
anyway?
the grandparent, authorized
To even take
to
them.
even take them if the parental
Right.
rights are not yours?
Right. If parents have just disappeared,
Yeah.
let's say that mom, and this happens so often, mom drops the kids off, gets in the car, and says, I'll be back Sunday night to pick them up, and mom goes off and doesn't come back.
And does not come back?
And then Monday morning,
Wow.
here we are, they've got to go to school,
Yes.
and if mom doesn't come back, maybe mom calls and said, I need you to
Oh.
keep them for a while.
Oh.
So we have so many young
Oh.
parents and young grandparents
Yes.
who are grappling
Yes,
with this
yes.
in this community, all across the country.
That
for that
is
matter.
absolutely real time, Helen.
It's real time. The drug epidemic is really
it's real
doing
time.
a number
Yes.
on families.
Yes. Where does it, well, I know that the average widow that's 70 in America brings in $695
There
a
you go.
month.
There you go.
End of story.
End of story.
$695 a month.
Think of what the rent is, or, if she's in her own home, which, maybe she is.
Maybe she is,
But-
but right. And this is real because I know in churches, etc., this generation of older people, they are having to deal with children that are not only being moved in, but the children have emotional issues
Right.
from the environment they came out of. And I am hearing more and more, and you can certainly speak to this, where the grandparents do not want the children released back to their children,
Right.
which is, oh no,
Oh, no, I've got them now.
I got them now.
And no, I don't want them to go back there.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. That is so, that is a challenge. Any innovative programs in the time wrapping up?
Oh, there are a number of innovative programs.
Any dealing with that subject?
There are.
Oh, good.
There
That's
are a
good.
number of
good,
them.
good.
Probably the best program, to be quite honest with you, are the mentoring programs that are developing, and that's where the faith community can really play a significant role. The mentoring programs, the programs that provide support, respite programs.
Okay.
If I'm an older grandparent raising my grandchildren and either my child is absent or on the fringes of their lives, every now and then I need respite.
Yes.
I need a
yeah,
break.
yeah.
And so those programs that offer respite, it's kind of like when we were growing up and the lady next door would say, let me keep the kids overnight, and the parents could have an evening free.
Yes, yes.
Well, it's formalizing that so that people can go to the grocery store and not have to pile all the kids into the car, or go to an appointment so that they don't have to take all the kids
Get
with
their
them.
hair
Get their
done.
hair done.
Or go to
Just a
Bible
break.
study.
Right, right.
Without having
go
a
to choir practice.
Yes, right.
So it's providing respite care, or the mentoring programs for kids who need help with school. And community mentoring programs can make such a difference. Again, if you've got grandparents or parents who are working and you've got young kids who need after-school programs, but they also probably need some additional assistance with homework. If I'm working 2 jobs, I'm probably getting home after they're in bed. So where are the programs where my child can make sure the homework is getting done and that they're being able to ask the questions that they didn't get answered in school that day, or they may not have even known what they needed to ask in school that day. And the other thing about a good mentoring program is that it exposes young people to other kinds of activities, and it provides human touch. The biggest thing tutors and mentors do when they sit down and work with the child is they put their arm around them and talk to them.
That's where my heart
Human
is.
touch.
The touch. Viewers, my goodness, this has been amazing. Powerful show with an extraordinary woman. Alpha female, I might add.
Old friend.
Old friend. Helen E. Jones-Kelly, attorney at law and executive director of ADAMHS Board in Montgomery County, Ohio. One of those emerging leaders in a tough time, tough situation with our children and their families. I hope you've learned a few things today. I hope you can pass the information on. Keep Helen in your prayers. Certainly keep me at the top of your list to tune in every week for The Power of Money. I'm Michelle Graves, and you have a wonderful, wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I look forward to talking to you again next week. You take care.